Alright, so gonna be doing a video here on the installation of a set of carbon fiber side skirts that I picked up from XtremeSupercars in Palm Beach. They make a lot of carbon fiber bits for the Gen 5 cars. I'll show you a few others that we have on there. But these are a set of pieces that Dodge does not make, but Wayne over at Xtreme put together. And it's a very nice piece, molded really well, finished perfectly on what's going to be exposed, and obviously still got some, it's rough finish on what's going to be covered up, which is fine. But what we're going to be doing is doing the installation of this onto this Gen 5. So the way that this is going to go basically drops in right onto the lower rocker panel on the Gen 5s. Now this panel, for those of you that don't know it, is actually aluminum. This is not carbon fiber, this is aluminum. And it's a whole piece that comes in and covers the exhaust and goes all the way up underneath the car. In order to do this, I'm going to have to drop it off the lift, but what I'll do is I'll put jack stands underneath just so I can get the lift to clear out of the way, and then I can come up in there and put it in. The way that the piece is made, it's molded to match, so this contour matches the bottom of the rocker panel perfectly. When we place it up here, even with very little pressure and holding that flat plate flat against the bottom of the rocker panel, there is no gap at all. The entire length of this till you get to the very end where it separates a little at the exhaust, which is fine. But the rest of it is a perfect fit the entire length. I've got the rock guards on here that we picked up, the PVC, I guess, rock guards that we have on there, and this carbon fiber skirt comes right up against it. It's not bothered by it at all, so we're not going to have to do anything about removing that or changing it. And this looks like it's going to fit right on there real easily. All right, a word on how this is going to get mounted. So this is going to be put in with physical fasteners. The way that that Xtreme is doing this right now is these units have no pre-drilled holes. So we're gonna drill the holes out, and the way that they've been installing it, they've been recommending installing it, is putting it in with blind rivets or pop rivets, whatever you want to call them, coming up underneath, going through the panel, and then through the aluminum panel, and then riveting it in place so it stays there permanently. I'm going to do it a little differently. I'm going to put it in with some riv nuts, so that if I ever want to remove it for whatever reason, I can do so without having to drill out pop rivets. So I'm going to put it in there with riv nuts. Those, where these are going to bolt in, I'm going to bolt it in from the flat side, as well as probably 2 or 3 that I'm going to come in on this angled portion where it comes up, simply to give it added rigidity so that we don't, there's no way to press down on it, or if somebody walks up to it inadvertently and gets too close over this widest point, it won't separate from the car or snap the fiber. At the end of the day, I'm drilling through into the sill anyway, so the actual holes that'll be on the side here, I'm not really too concerned about, because at the end of the day, these are going to stay on here. If they're damaged, I'll replace them. So the holes and everything else and whatnot, they're all going to be where they need to be, so I'm not overly concerned with that. They're all going to be hidden in blind unless you're sitting underneath the car, at which point you'll see the bolts. So we're going to go ahead and get started with this. I'll show you pretty much a step-by-step on the passenger side, and obviously the driver's side is going to be the same thing. Then we'll show you the finished product when it's on there. So first things first, got to get it up on the jack stand, get the lift down out of the way, and then I will take a look at this and see where I'm going to place the holes in order to be able to get this up there as firmly as I can. All right, so we'll get started with that. All right, so when this is positioned, all right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a series of holes in the flat on the bottom, which isn't really so critical. The ones that I'm more concerned with are the angled bolts. So basically the bolts that are going to come in on this angled portion of the piece. This is the flat that goes flat underneath the car. This is the piece that's angled in. Now, since you're going to be getting in and out of the car where the door opening is, realistically speaking, your feet aren't going to come out over here by the hinge. You're really going to be in this section. So when we were doing it, I'm going to make sure to put in a bolt where this bend occurs, right here, one in the back, because that's where the downward point or pressure might come if somebody mistakenly hits it as they're getting out of the car. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I put one bolt hole here, one here at least, and then I'll do one more up in the front. This section isn't going to get really hit from downward side, so I'll put one up here, and then the rest of them are just going to be straight across on the bottom, and that'll be more than enough. So we're going to basically mark up where those bends are, and then I'll come in from the back, and then I'll come in about 12 inches from the front to be able to get that lined up quick. And I'll show you how I'm going to put those holes and where I'm going to decide where those holes are going to go. All right. All right. So this is how we're going to get these skirts mounted. Basically, what we're going to do be putting in is a riv nut or threaded insert. Everybody has a different name for it, or a threaded rivet. But basically what it is it's a threaded rivet piece that goes into a hole that you're going to pre-drill, and then basically what's going to happen is you're going to rivet. It's got a crimp tool that basically crimps the threaded portion down, and it pins this thread onto the base. Then at that point you can come in and you can screw in from underneath it. Once that thread is fixed in there, you'll be able to come in from underneath and thread on the piece. So what's going to be on the carbon itself, okay, is basically going to be a fender washer, okay, and then your whatever bolt it is. In my case, I'm going to go with 6mm bolts. These are 12mm long. I'll let you know how it all fits in there, and if we're going to hit or if we're going to rub up against anything in there, you got plenty of space between the sill and the exhaust because there's insulation in there, so it's really not going to be that big of an issue. The bigger issue is the washer, right? So the idea with the washer is that it's going to come in on this angled portion, okay? And I'll likely do the same thing underneath on the bottom. But basically what we're going to do is that threaded washer is going to come in here, or rather that fender washer is going to come up in here, and it's going to give me a huge surface area against this flat to hold that screw down, or when I hold that screw down. And what that's going to do is going to basically increase the area that's mechanically holding this in place. So if there is any pressure on it, that entire washer is going to take the whole load, as opposed to it being just the head of a screw that's going to be smaller. Okay, so bottom line is we're going to put that in there, and then that'll be threaded in place. I'm using button heads with Allen keys on the top, but you can use anything that you want. It doesn't really make a difference. It can be a hex nut as well. It's not going to be an issue in terms of clamps. So that's how we're going to do it. So now that I've gotten that, this is what this is going to do now is going to basically line up where this hole is going to end up being. So since this washer is going to be in place, like I said, I'm going to put basically a hole where this bend occurs here. There'll be a hole there. There's going to be a hole in the back over here by on the back side, which is where the people are going to be getting in and out of the car. And then, like I said, there's going to be another one way up here. So in order to figure out where I'm going to drill that hole, how far up or down I'll drill it, okay, I'm going to drill it to the lowest side that I can on there, where that surface area is going to be covered by the washer. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that washer as a guide to determine where I'm going to put the hole in here, top to bottom. The idea is I want to go as far down as I can on here, so that if for whatever reason I take this skirt off and I decide to run without it for whatever reason, then the threaded insert will be down underneath the car as far as it can go. So basically it won't be visible from above. And it won't be an eyesore. Obviously I don't want to put it up here too high, because then when you take the skirt off, you'll see a threaded insert there. So I want to go in as low as I can, and what's going to limit me is the thickness of the washer on that piece, right? So I'm going to go ahead and mark those holes, like I said, where I wanted them, and then once those are marked, we'll go ahead and drill out. Okay, so basically I'm going to be about 12 inches back. I'll put another hole right at the bend, as I said, and another one in the back. It's not going to be precision. This is really just eyeballing it. What I'll do is, I'll screw it forward or back, because I'm going to try to see if I can do this in such a way that I can give you guys specifics, so that it makes it easier for you guys to do it if you don't want to just eyeball it, or if you're not an eyeballer type of person. All right. On the flat side, there's really nothing underneath the car that's going to impede you. So all of this is completely smooth and blank, with the exception of this gap here. So one hole is going to come behind that gap. If you reach up in there, you'll be able to actually see that there's absolutely nothing in the way there. So anywhere you want to put this hole is fine. So I'll just go back, more or less eyeballing halfway the distance between the end and the hole, and then we'll go ahead and put one hole there. Okay, because of this fact that this is here, what I want to do is try to see if I screw in somewhere and stagger these, so that none of these two holes are ever aligned, because it doesn't make much sense to put two holes and one right next to each other. So if we're going to put one here, I'll put one a little bit further down, and then the same thing, I'll stagger on these holes here. Okay, so again, just eyeballing it as to where we're going to be with these. I'll probably end up going, so 2, 3, we'll probably put 5 holes all together. So we'll go with it at this point. What we're going to go with is 5 holes, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then on the angle side, I'm going to go with 3, 1, 2, and 3, and that should be enough. If you want to go and overkill, I mean, there's nothing stopping you from putting in a couple of extra. Nothing is not going to hurt anything. Once I get this mounted up with 3 holes, I'll see how rigid it is on there. If it's not rigid enough to my taste, then since everything is threaded, I can just remove the piece, put in another pair of holes, drill the new set of holes, and we're golden. So with these 8, I think we're probably going to be fine. But again, once everything is on and screwed down, we'll check it for rigidity and figure out whether or not we want to add a couple of extra holes. Okay. All of these are going to be hidden anyway, so you're not really having to concern yourself too much with drilling through on the finish side. Normally, if you're doing this, I would tell you to drill from the finish side through, because your drill bit will give you a clean hole on the finish side, and then you'll be able to do it. I would always put some painter's tape on there anyway, just to avoid any heartache. But at the end of the day, if since we're going to be, these screws are going to be completely hidden from sight, and these holes will be completely hidden from sight, we don't really have to worry about the finish. So I'm going to go ahead and go through with where we're at. To be able to do it, I am not going to be drilling 2 holes. I'm just going to be drilling the 1 hole at the 1/4 inch. This is, it's going to be relatively easy to drill through, so not going to be anything earth-shattering. Notice that I'm not going full speed on the drill bit. No need to. Okay, and it's going to give you a nice clean hole. If you do it slow and steady, also less chance of it skating on you. And the masking tape also helps, by the way, so drill bit is less likely to skid on you on the masking tape. So let's get that hole started. Okay. here. Let me double check something real fast. You got the space there. And this is going to be up in here anyway, so yeah, we're good. All right. So we are. There are 5 holes, basically 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then the 3 holes along the angle side, and that'll be good. Now, the reason there's such a big gap between these 2 holes, again, this is going to sit. Once this is on, notice that this hole is going to be more or less here, where most passengers are going to get out. This hole is up front here. This is the hinge, so nobody's ever really going to put any pressure on this, even with their feet, because even when you open the door, you're going to have to get your feet out from the side. You're not going to be putting them over the hinge. So that's why I left the gap. But like I said, worst case scenario, if I feel I need to add one, I'll go ahead and add one once we're there, but I'd rather drill fewer holes than more. Okay. The top side of it, see what I was saying is, because it's fiberglass, you'll always get this to happen. Okay, this is always going to happen. It's inevitable. But again, since it's hidden, nobody's ever going to see that. There's no need to worry about it. Okay. Otherwise, what I would have done would have been the opposite. I would have put the painter's tape on this side, drilled from the other side just to protect the finish, and gone with that route. Okay. But that's where we're at. So now I will have to get these into position where they're going to be. I'm going to have to figure out a way to hold them up there because I don't have my gopher with me, my 12-year-old. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and mock this up, hold it up some way, somehow, and once I've got it held in place, I'm going to mark a couple of the holes and or a couple of the points on the body panel where I'm going to drill, and then we'll get those set in there and drilled. All right. So, all right. So we're gonna be putting in this piece now, and I thought at first that I was going to be able to do it by myself and somehow prop it up in place, but it's a lot easier to get a second set of hands. So I got my resident Viper tech with me, my son, Carlos, underneath there. And what we're going to do is I'm going to hold this thing in place, and once we have it positioned in place, then we're going to go ahead and put the marks for the holes underneath the car. So let's get this lined up. So now we've got those marked, and we should be able to see those marks. Let me see if I can give this to you in the video. So we have the marks up underneath there.
You're drilling?
All right. Now what we need to do is drill the holes, and I will put in the threaded inserts. Okay, so what I'm going to show you here is what, in case you guys don't know what it is, or you haven't seen it or haven't heard about them before. Everybody calls them different things, but basically what we're going to be using is a threaded insert. And those inserts are going to go into the car, and they're basically going to crimp on and stay permanently fixed to the sheet metal. Now, like I said before, the piece of the sill that we're going to be bolting this into is actually sheet metal. It's aluminum. It's not carbon fiber. So what I did is I sacrificed here a heat shield from one of my heat guns to show you what this basically does or how it works. So basically these are the shields that we're going to be putting in there, or the riv nuts, or the threaded inserts. Everybody has a different name, or threaded rivets. But basically these are going to go in there. You're going to drill a hole depending on the size of the of the nut, you'll drill the appropriate hole. In this case, it's a 3/8 inch hole. You're going to drill it, and then that way the insert will slide in and out easily. Okay, it's fluted on the one side, so that when we crush it down, that flute will become a tight fit, and it will not let that threaded nut spin in there. So essentially, this is what we're going to be doing. Once that's crimped in there, then it'll look like that. Okay, and that unit will basically get the threaded bolt from the other side. Oops. We'll get the threaded bolt from the other side. Okay. Obviously, you can use bolts of different size and different length. This is a 12mm screw that I'm putting in there, so that'll give me enough space for the carbon fiber, a washer, and then be in there and not protrude too far inside. Okay. To show you how it works, or how we push that in there, or how we rivet it in there. Essentially, I've already got one loaded on the tool, but essentially it's we're going to put it into here. Okay, and then once that's in there, okay, we're just going to cinch down on it. Okay, obviously this piece is going to be fixed to the car, so it won't be dancing around like this. But then all we do is crimp it down. Okay, until it's fixed in there. Okay, and then the tool is actually threaded in there, and that's how it's pulling it down. So remove the tool once it's crimped down, and you have your riveted nut, or your riv nut, or your threaded insert. And that's it. And then once you're doing, like I said again, basically we put it in there, and we're going to screw these in. All right, these, the ones that I'm showing you here, are basically brass, so they won't corrode, but I'm not going to go with brass on the car. What we're going to do with the one on the car, is we're going to use stainless steel. So it's exactly the same thing, except it's just stainless, so that when I screw the stainless bolt into the stainless, we don't have any galvanic rust or anything like that, because of two different metals. Even though the brass will be fine, but at the end of the day, the stainless and stainless will be better. So that's what we're going to go with on there. And we're going to go ahead and make some holes on the side of a Viper. Be back in a second. All right, so we've gotten a couple of the holes drilled here and here, and one here, and I already put in one of the riv nuts into there, okay, or one of the threaded inserts into there, and that's already crimped up into place. So I'm going to put in another one in here and crimp it. Now, if you guys, you can't see here, but you can see that I'm kind of hitting something. That's basically the insulation. This is basically the insulation underneath the exhaust. You have plenty of space. You're just basically pushing up on it slightly, so that's not going to be a big deal. And when the riv nut crimps down, it actually comes back down a little bit. So it really is not going to affect or impact anything, and it's not going to hit the exhaust. So all we're going to do is crimp this in. Okay. Remove the tool. And we have the next threaded insert in place. All right, guys, so through the magic of video editing, we've now finished all the riv nuts insertions onto the sill. So if you notice, we've got one here and one here on the diagonal, and we have the 5 going down the side. There was going to be one third one on the side here, but if you notice, when I ended up lining it up and marking the nut, the location of that riv nut for the corner, it's rather for the diagonal on the carbon fiber piece, it's not high enough in order to be able to drill through. So the riv nut would have been in the corner of the sill. So that's obviously impossible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mount it up like this, with basically a riv nut all the way up in the front, a riv nut here, and then the others that you saw towards the back. And I'm going to take a look and feel or put it on there and see how it feels. If I see that the riv nut is not going to be in the right place, or there's not going to be enough support with the downward pressure on this, then what I will do is I will add another riv nut between these two, as close to the edge as I can here, and then that will give me the support, because it really only comes up about an inch on the side here. So it should be fine, but we'll test it out and put it on there. But again, as you guys see, those rib nuts are all in there and they're all ready to go. All right, so I'm going to put on the piece now and come right back. All right, guys, so we're back. Nothing else shattering here. Basically, the holes that we had already drilled into place are all there. Everything should line up just fine, and we're going to put them up. We're going to put the piece up into the car. Now, when we were doing this, or when I was doing the installation, I was showing you how we were going to put it in there. So basically, what we're going to do is it's a 6mm nut with a very large fender washer. That's going to give me a nice, good, strong hold on there, and very small likelihood of any kind of flex on the piece. When you put in a pop rivet, the diameter of most pop rivets is significantly smaller than the washer. I'm going to put it in there with the washer. Now, if I was doing it with pop rivets, I'd likely pop rivet through a washer like this anyway. Just to be able to do it. And basically what you would do is you just get a pop rivet that would go through the washer, put it up in there, and then do it. The only issue with that I have is the permanency of it. I can't remove a pop rivet. You'd have to drill it out. So not quite what I want to do. So we're going to go with the fender washers and the screws. All right. Since the easy one to locate is the one that's on the angle, I'm going to go ahead and put that one in there first. I'm just threading it in my hand. And these rivet nuts are the threads on them are very, very good. So it's very easy to do it. When you're putting them in with the tool, just got to be careful that you're not overdoing it. But it's easy enough to put them on there and thread them in at least a couple of threads, and then it'll hold it in place, and then I'll come back in and tighten it with a nut rag. If you do it carefully and you drill these holes and you put them all in the right place, everything's going to align real nice for you. So you're not going to have to fight very much. Sorry, and again, the threads on the rivet nuts are good. So just the thread on real quick without much of a problem. All right. Okay, so I'm just going to jump underneath there and tighten everything down. All right, so we're back. And we've gone ahead and put on the skirt. The only thing really that we did was started threading in each one of the bolts along the bottom edge, and we basically fixed it in there really well. We use fender washers on every bolt. I'll show you that in a second. But if you see here, this is the gap, or lack of gap, and it fits real good right up against the rock chip guard, and then runs the entire length all the way until it cuts off right before the exhaust. And then if you want to see underneath, so basically what we did was we have big fender washers that we used with the bolts. I hand tightened them so that we can basically get those tied up against the aluminum railing, or the aluminum sill rather, and that's what we're left with. Alright guys, so putting in the driver's side sill, but basically the same thing as what I just did on the passenger side. Again, we're using pretty large fender washers with the 6mm bolts. Essentially the same as a number, sorry, as a 1/4 inch by 20 thread, but obviously in a metric. It's just, I just decided to go metric with it, just make my life easy. But you can do it obviously with anything you want. Just you're gonna match whatever you put into the rivets. The riv nuts or the threaded inserts are already in place on this side. I've already drilled everything out. One thing I didn't mention on the other side was that once I went in and got everything, started bolting everything up, some of the carbon was getting caught in the threads. So to make my life easier, I basically drilled the holes out slightly larger, and that way when I put the bolt in there, I have a tiny bit of play. Once I tighten down with the washer, it's not going to go anywhere. So it just makes life easier to install it once you're trying to get in there. So what I did was, I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm using 16mm on the inside, and I'm using 12mm when I'm coming in from the diagonal. So we're just going to line this up with where the screw goes in, and then just thread on that first one by hand. I'll thread them all in by hand actually, and that's it. That'll hold it up, and I go in one at a time. One thing on the threads, I find that when you crimp these threads, these threaded inserts, some of the threads sometimes get a little bit marred. So just to avoid any problems, I went ahead and chased the threads with a tap, just to be able to get the threads clean. That way the screws go in really easily. You don't want anything getting stuck in there. If a screw breaks in there, then you pretty much have to remove the side sill and I would guess cut out the rivet or move the bolts, so whatever you prefer. But bottom line, to avoid it, I had a little bit of trouble on the passenger side with a couple of the threads, but all I had to do was clean out the threads with a tap and you're done. So I went ahead and did it to all of them here to start it, because just make my life easier. And then I'm just gonna, you know, hand place these screws in place, and then once these are all started, I'll go ahead and tighten them with a driver with an Allen head. Just a nut driver, and coming in on each and one of the bolts so that we can get in there. With the Allen head, that's appropriate for whatever bolts you're using. And same thing, essentially fender washers on each of the bolts, going all the way the length of the sill. But basically, so the gaps against the body panel are perfect, all the way running the entire edge against the body. There's no gap at all, none whatsoever. So it goes, fits really, really nice. The weave, I'll give you a nice look at the weave there. Again, same thing. He matches it pretty, you know, pretty much perfect. With the weave coming back at a diagonal and sweeping back. If we go to the passenger side, it's exactly the same weave, with the weave sweeping backwards. So it actually looks really nice. It's a nice little attention to detail. and they're really well put on there. And again, there's a flex in it. Obviously I'm flexing a piece of really thin aluminum, but there is very little play in that, you know, in terms of thinking. I'm actually wrenching it on the longest piece. Obviously when we come in closer to the pieces that are you know, shorter, obviously there's no flex in there at all. And if we go up to the front, same thing, no flex. So it's a really, really nice piece. They did a great job on it, and installing it this way is just an easy way. And if you guys want to remove it, again, bottom line is, the only reason I did it with these riv nuts, it's a little bit more work, but at the end of the day, I did it so that if I ever needed to remove that for whatever reason, I could do it without having to drill out anything. I just have to remove these screws. All right, that's it.